Okay, excellent. So, yeah, quick update from me. Um, okay, good. I'm glad the echo stopped. Yeah, there were just a couple of things that had gone awry. Um, we are currently fundraising for Phantom Pulse, my new audio drama about a rock band in the 90s that can exercise ghosts with their music. So, if you've ever used an atypical resource or production handbook, anything like that, we provide all of those resources for free. I do these every month for free. And if you want to show your appreciation for that, I would so adore you forever if you went to phantompulse.com and gave to our Kickstarter there. I will also put a link in the description of the YouTube video, which I'm going to do right now. Um, so yeah, that we are in our last week almost. We've got 8 days left of our campaign. And we're doing pretty well. I'm pretty hopeful that we will make our goal. But we need all the help we can get. Tell a friend. Go check out what we're doing. We're doing a big live stream for that next Thursday, December 4th, whatever that day is. I think it's Thursday. It's got an incredible cast. I am making it with the amazing Ella Watts of Camlan, and Bryn Grugel and Evan Cunningham, who made In Strange Woods sound amazing as it sounds. So I think it's going to be a really, really special show, but it's just because it's an audio drama as well as a rock album, it is going to cost a little bit of money to make. So that's why we're crowdfunding for it, which is not something that Atypical has done before for a first season show. So that is my plea. I will say all of that once more at the end of the stream. But for now, let's get into talking about audio drama. If you are new here, I do these on the last Wednesday of every month, variable times. Usually it's sometime in the afternoon. And it's just an opportunity to ask me, a person who's been making audio drama for 10 years, about making audio drama. So please ask your questions in the chat. It can be anything. I prioritize live questions so that we can get into a dialogue if you have follow-up questions, but I also do have questions that people submit in advance that I'll sort of dive into now, unless anybody has a question. Let me just make sure I'm looking at all of my chats. I am. Okay. So, yes, I'm going to dive into one of these other questions. Okay, here's one that's been... I often do have a lot of live questions, so some of these questions in the spreadsheet of mine are quite old. So, sorry, this question is from May. But I will eventually get to all of the questions. So, submit them in advance if you're not able to attend a future stream, and I will get to them. Okay, so this person has a podcast, Dash the Podcast, now in season 2. So probably 2 full seasons. You can go listen to that podcast right now. That's performing well on Spotify, high download count, followers, but not well on Apple at all. Is there something I could be doing wrong here? This question is so interesting to me because it has an easy answer in some respects, which is that no, there's nothing you're doing wrong. But it also is kind of a complicated question in the sense that the tides are always changing on this. For a long time, all of Atypical shows mostly were being listened to on Apple Podcasts because that was really the dominant app for a long time. And then Spotify over the last couple of years has really been eating Apple's lunch when it comes to listener behavior, especially for audio fiction. But then just in the last year, I would say, maybe even less than that, Apple Podcasts has started kind of creeping back into play in a way that I find very interesting. And I think it's because Spotify is so heavily pushing video on their app that fiction podcasts are at a disadvantage, because obviously if we wanted to make a video podcast, we would be making television, not audio fiction. Not to say that I haven't experimented with versions of video. And certainly all of our podcasts are available on YouTube over a static image. But no, there's not anything you're doing wrong. I think something that I find interesting is, both Spotify and Apple Podcasts have very robust marketing tools, Spotify especially. And Spotify, you can create individual links for things so that you can, post something on Tumblr and post something on Blue Sky and post something on Reddit and Reddit, actually the audio drama subreddit, very understandably doesn't like having tracking in any of the links that you post. So don't do any tracking links on Reddit. But for anything else, you can kind of track and see where the folks are coming from. I don't think Apple has that capacity, but certainly, it depends on what you're posting makes a difference in terms of the links that you're sharing, right? Like, I'm a big Tumblr poster, and Tumblr prefers Spotify links in terms of playing something inside of a post. And so I share a lot of Spotify links on Tumblr, which means that sometimes our listeners in the past have been more Spotify heavy. And like I said, like I think, cause yeah, you did say that more people were listening on Spotify, but not well on Apple. Yeah. I think in general, Spotify has started to get more of the market share of Apple. I'm an Apple girly through and through in terms of my music. So and I listen to my podcast on Overcast, and sometimes Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts does have a promotional form that you can submit to that, you know, if you've got a new season coming out or a season finale or something special happening, you can submit your podcast, kind of explain why you think it should be promoted on Apple's homepage or new and noteworthy or whatever it might be. They're really good about including fiction in those things. Like the last time I was on Apple's homepage, I think that there was a fiction show being featured somewhere on the homepage. I will say anecdotally, I don't know how much that is doing these days. I would be curious to sort of hear from other fiction podcasters or just other podcasters in general. Back in 2016, Apple Podcasts featured us on the homepage in the carousel for the Bright Sessions, and it made a huge difference. We got tons of listeners from it. But we got a similar carousel for another one of our shows in the last couple of years, and it didn't move the needle all that much. So I think in general, discovery is becoming harder and harder, but broadly speaking, I wouldn't be too concerned about where your listeners are listening. If you have a Patreon, if you have some sort of membership program, if you have premium feeds, whatever, just make sure that in your credits, in your podcast description, all of that stuff is there for them, because, or like even just a newsletter sign up, right? Because I think so much of being an online creator now is about making sure that you have control over your audience. For instance, I was talking to a friend earlier today about Twitter, which, you know, I've deleted both Atypical and my own personal Twitter account for obvious reasons. Although I did just post a tweet on the Bright Sessions Twitter for the first time in over a year, because I really want people to know about Phantom Pulse, this Kickstarter that I'm doing. And so I'll you know, go down any avenue I have to. But I had the largest sort of, my largest following was on Twitter back in the heyday, you know, and you can't really take those people with you. And so I think regardless of where somebody is listening to your show, you want to try and funnel them into a thing that you control, whether that's an email list, whether that's a Patreon, whether that's something else. I would say that should be your focus rather than trying to get more listeners on one particular app over another, because I think ultimately, like, I don't know how much that matters in the long run. That's my take, at least. Some folks might feel differently, but yeah, I don't know how much of a difference it really makes in the long run. Okay. Let's see. Is that question? Okay, this is okay, yeah, this is another question from May. I'm so sorry that I'm just getting to these, but yeah, the chats in the past have been fairly active. And I'll use that as a reminder that you can ask me questions in any of the chats. I'm looking at all of them. As I pause to sip my water and chew on ice. I'm sorry if you can hear that. Okay, so somebody asks, I'm trying to decide if a drama comedy about Peace Corps service would be better as a limited series or as a limited TV series or a podcast series. What criteria should I use? This is a question I get a lot of, like, how do you know when something is right for a particular medium? And I think, you know, for each person, it's going to be different, right? And for each project, the thing that kind of pushes it over to one medium over the other is going to be different. But I think, like, it is just worth trying the story out in those different mediums. And by that, I mean, you know, not making a limited TV series and then also making a podcast. I mean, just like writing the pilot script in TV form and writing the pilot script in podcast form, and writing whatever the first chapter would be of the book or the script for the graphic novel. Like, I think you can really go far afield when it comes to figuring out a story in, in a particular medium. Like, for instance, I have a novel that's out on submission right now, a sort of queer outlaw period romance in the 1890s that initially started as a podcast idea, because like that is always my first thought, right? Is if I have an idea, it's like, okay, well, how is this a podcast? What is the audio drama version of this? And then in the course of writing the scripts, I was like, this isn't easy. Like, I don't know why, but this isn't, and not to say that writing is always easy, because it's definitely not. But like, I couldn't quite crack the character arcs in the way that I wanted. I couldn't quite crack the pacing in the way that I wanted. And then just as an exercise, I like wrote like a little like kind of flashback chapter of these two characters sort of in their past that we sort of would have learned about in the course of an audio drama. And I was like, oh, this wants to be a book. This isn't an audio drama. This wants to be a book. And now it's a book. I don't know if it's a book that you'll be able to purchase and read at any point in the near future, but it's a book that I've written several times, to be totally honest. So yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes those things just have to be experimented with. That's actually kind of how The Infinite Noise came to be, my first novel, which, do I have a copy nearby? I do not. There's a copy, up there, you can see it. Was that in the first, and I think actually this is like a good illustrative example. So The Bright Sessions, if you're not familiar, is a show about people with supernatural abilities in therapy. And most of the first couple of seasons really take place in that therapy room, right? And so it's very, very limited perspective. We are experiencing these characters' therapy sessions as they sort of talk about things that are happening in their real lives. And there's romance in the first couple of seasons. I mean, it continues throughout the seasons, but sort of them getting together in the first couple of seasons of this high school kid, Caleb, and a boy in his class, Adam. And in the course of writing the first two seasons, from Caleb going to therapy and telling Dr. Bright about this kid in his class who he's kind of drawn to, I was like, what is Adam thinking through all of this? And I sat down and I wrote like a POV chapter from Adam's perspective. And then that ended up becoming like chapter 2 of The Infinite Noise. I still have a copy of Infinite Noise that I'm meaning to annotate and send back to you circa the book tour 1,000 years ago. Oh my God, I love that. Thank you, Solar. Oh, that means a lot. I love that book a lot, and that tour was really, really special. My first book came out in 2019, so I got to go on tour, and then of course my next two books came out in 2020 and 2021, so things looked a little bit different. But that's how The Infinite Noise came to be. It was just an exercise for me, and that doesn't mean that story didn't work in audio, because we still kept exploring that romance in audio, but it was explored in a completely different way in the book. And so if you're sort of deciding between like limited TV series, podcast series, write the pilot of both of those things. And if you find yourself in sort of the podcast series thinking like, man, this scene would be a lot better if we could see this thing, or stylistically, tonally, it'd be better if we could kind of like something I was thinking about a lot, actually. I don't know if y'all have watched Pluribus, the new Vince Gilligan show on Apple TV. It is fabulous. New episode tonight. I can't wait. I'm gonna plurbin it. It's what I call watching Pluribus. Anyway, there was this won't spoil anything, but the opening sort of sequence of the most recent episode, the one from last week, was completely devoid of dialogue, pretty much. And you're sort of like experiencing this person's day, basically, and sort of learning about what they do. And it's more or less like in silence, right? Like they're not speaking to anybody. There's, of course, the sound of what they're doing and some scoring, but you're not actually hearing any dialogue. And like, that's obvious. Like whenever I see a scene like that on TV that works really, really well, I just think like, yeah, you can't do this in audio. Of course you can't, because it relies so much on, I mean, you could do it if you had an internal monologue narrator, but I think it's more effective if like you are outside of that character's perspective and just observing them, right? Because you don't know what this guy is thinking. You're having to kind of assume a lot of things. You're having to put together the pieces. And yeah, that's just something that's not going to work in audio. And so I think if you, in the course of writing a sort of a pilot script for your TV version, if you find that like you're doing a lot of scenes that rely heavily on visuals and don't have a lot of dialogue, and then you go into the podcast and you sort of discover that like, oh, these scenes that I've been thinking of don't really translate in audio very well. Or maybe you'll find that like in writing the TV script, you're like, oh, I really like, I want to keep these things a mystery. I want to leave these things up to the listener's imagination. Like, this will work better in audio. You just have to experiment. I think in terms of criteria, like, there aren't any, because in audio you can kind of just do whatever you want, right? Like, episodes don't have to be a particular length, seasons don't have to be a particular length. And so, you know, like, it's not like you're like, well, okay, this is going to be 6 episodes of 30 minutes each, so it has to be a podcast. Like, that, you can do whatever you want in podcast. So there's no real criteria. It's just what's going to serve the story best, I think. Okay, so I'll ask, would you recommend co-reading and listening for a first-time listener of the Bright Sessions? Would you recommend finishing one format and then going back to start the other? I've thought about this a lot because I don't know. I don't know that I have like a strong opinion on this. If you want like a like canonical in-universe order of how things actually go within the books and the podcast, you can just go to thebrightsessions.com, and I believe on our listen page it sort of lists like, if you were going to start this in universe order, you would start with The Neon Darkness, the second book, right? Because it's a prequel. And then you would go to season 1 and you would read The Infinite Noise, and then you would, you know, like, it kind of lays it out. But honestly, like, I think probably what I would do is listen to the first 2 seasons of The Bright Sessions. Because I think, well, yeah, I think I would listen to the first 2 seasons of The Bright Sessions, read The Infinite Noise, then listen to season 3, read A Neon Darkness, listen to season 4, read Some Faraway Place. I think that would be my suggestion. I think if you didn't want to do that, if you didn't want to go back and forth, I would say listen to the show first and then read the books, just because the story did start in audio. Like, that is what it was meant for. And I think that in some ways that's like its purest form. But I also know people who've like just read the books and never listened to the podcast. Like, the books are meant to stand alone. But I think that like they'll be more impactful if you love the characters already, if you feel attached to them. I think that like Some Faraway Place, I think what you don't want to do, I think you can read The Infinite Noise and A Neon Darkness before listening to the show entirely. Like, you can just sort of like absorb those things, and then listen to the show. But I would save Some Faraway Place for at least the end of season 4. Like, if you want to wait until you've listened to the entire series, that works too. But I would say Some Faraway Place, you definitely want to read after season 4. My fiance was wondering and asked me to ask. I haven't read all 3 books yet, so I'm excited to consume in that way too. Oh, yay. Okay, well, I mean, report back about how it is, because I'd love to know, because obviously I haven't done that, you know? Like, there's no way for me to objectively experience what the best way to absorb this world would be, because it was sort of just happening to me all at once. Sienna says, I had my friend listen to the first 4 seasons and then read the books and then listen 5 through 7. Yeah, I think that's also a very, very solid way to approach it. Cause yeah, I think like if you just kind of want to like read all the books at once, after season 4 would be the moment. And then seasons 5, 6, and 7 are kind of standalones. But Some Faraway Place, the first 4 seasons of the Bright Sessions are sort of a contained thing. And then I think Some Faraway Place is like the button to that contained thing. It's sort of like the epilogue, if you will. I mean, now there's an actual Bright Sessions epilogue in the Bright Sessions feed if you have not listened to it yet. Okay, Luna says, I always recommend TBS, Infinite Noise, AM Archives, A Neon Darkness, College Tapes, Some Faraway Place. Ooh, saucy. I like that. I mean, that is the order in which those things came out, right? Yeah. And so, like, I think that if you want to experience my writing getting better and like me getting a better handle on the story, that definitely is the way to experience it, because yeah, it's release order. That's the order that I wrote things in. And so I think that like in some ways, like those things make sense. But I don't think that there's a wrong way to do it. Alrighty. Okay. Another question from the spreadsheet. This one from June. Again, I'm so sorry. Is it hard to stay creative when this is also your job? What do you do to reset yourself when you feel bogged down by the job part of being a creative person? Boy, that's a good question. That's a tough question. I mean, this is my job. This is not my only job. I have 2 part-time jobs to pay the bills, and probably in January, I'm going to be looking for a full-time job as well. Or instead of, I guess, I'll have to drop the part-time jobs to do a full-time job. But, Yeah, I mean, the entertainment industry right now is really, really rough. Audio fiction has always been a niche within that. And so, it can't always pay the bills. And it certainly hasn't been paying the bills lately. Um, but Luna had a follow up in the books, but I think all it really matters is that the college tapes and some Fireplace are both improved by reading A Neon Darkness first. Yes, definitely. That is definitely true. Yeah, read A Neon Darkness before you read some Fireplace or listen to the college tapes for sure. Yeah. But I mean, in terms of like, how do you stay creative when when your finances are on the line, the pressure of that. I mean, I think I think understanding that it ebbs and flows. And I think, I mean, this is something that I'm constantly trying to decouple, and something that I genuinely actually talk about in my own therapy quite a bit, because the thing that brings me fulfillment, the things that brings me joy, the thing that I am doing most of my time, spending most of my time doing, is being creative and is making things, and so that then when things go wrong, when it's not paying the bills or something isn't hitting or the story isn't working or whatever it is, if you're experiencing a problem a work problem or whatever, it sort of consumes every part of you, right? Because it's not just a work problem. It's also an emotional problem, right? It's also a problem with the people in your head or the story that you're trying to tell that you are attached to. So I think that there's a certain degree to which I haven't done that decoupling successfully. And so I don't feel equipped to give advice on it. But that said, I think something that's important to understand about being a creative, no matter what kind of creative you are, whether you're a writer, an actor, a director, anything, visual artist, is that you just have to get accustomed to heartbreak, right? Being a creative is just heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak, where you pour your heart and soul into this thing, and then it doesn't go anywhere, or it dies on the vine, or whatever, right? We've all experienced rejections all the time. One of my best friends, Megan Fitzmartin, who was one of the writers on the college tapes and AM Archives, brilliant writer. She started doing this thing that now I've started to do as well, which is in our journals, because we both keep sort of scrapbooks of our year sort of throughout the year, having a rejection list where it's you kind of celebrate your rejections, because it's that means that I got something out there and that somebody looked at it or listened to it or read it and they didn't like it or they didn't like enough to pay for it. But, I still got something out there, and I'm going to celebrate getting that rejection, because it means that my art is being out in the world. And so I think that finding things like that, finding things to kind of trick your brain into handling that heartbreak differently. I think the other thing too, I'm going to make sure that I'm even answering your question. Yeah, it's hard to stay creative. What do you do to reset yourself? Yeah, well, I mean, definitely the sort of the job part of being a creative, right? Which is this kind of stuff, right? Making sure that I'm constantly on social media, and making sure that people are listening to my things, and doing admin and doing budgeting and doing, all of that kind of stuff. I think something that's important is setting off sort of a space of time for that kind of stuff. Every week, sort of Mondays and Thursdays, I do kind of bookkeeping and administrative stuff, so social media stuff, kind of planning for the week or scheduling posts, whatever. And then Tuesdays, Thursdays, I sort of keep free for meetings as much as I can. Sometimes I don't get to schedule when a meeting is, right? Because it's with a bigger team, and I just kind of have to make it work. But if, someone reaches out to me, or I'm meeting with somebody about something, I try to just make those things Tuesdays and Thursdays, right? So that then Monday afternoons and Fridays are creative time, right? That is usually what I try to do. So I think protecting your time, kind of figuring out what schedule works for you in terms of siloing the job stuff off of the creative job stuff. And then I think in terms of staying creative, I think it's important to have something that is just yours, right? So by that I mean there's lots of stuff that I do in writing that isn't writing, but that helps me write, if you're watching this, you probably have listened to one of my playlists, or at least know that I make a ton of playlists for things. And I also make like Pinterest boards for things. I often like collect posts on Tumblr, on my private Tumblr, of like things that sort of remind me of a particular character or story. And I do end up sharing a lot of those things, but I think it's good to have like a little piece that's just for you, you know? And it's sort of an avenue through which to step into that creativity. And I think the way that I think about this is like writing fanfic for yourself. I actually like literally today, and I probably will share it because I'm like, you know, trying to drum up interest. But on the Phantom Pulse band Tumblr, phantompulseband.tumblr.com, I've been blogging a bunch of posts that like I've saved over the last 3 years of developing the show, of like different vibes and things that remind me of characters or whatever. And there's this like one really goofy video that just like really reminds me of something that like that reminds me of, as if these are real people, but like that makes me think about these two characters and like them being the people in this video. And so like, and that sort of popped up today because I'd queued it to repost. I saw it and I was like, I just like immediately like a scene popped into my head. And so I'm like writing a little like, you know, scene, like a prose scene, from one of the characters' perspectives that like I'll probably post to Tumblr and share. But like I do that kind of stuff all the time for me, you know, where it's just like, and sometimes it's like a little snippet in the Notes app. Sometimes it's a full thing. Sometimes it's a thing that ends up becoming a book, you know. That's happened to me twice now. So those things can build into something bigger, but I think the important thing is to do them without that being the goal, right? And to do that without having that in mind as you're doing it, and just to do it because it's fun to think about these characters and it's fun to be creative when you love the story and love the characters. And so I think for me it really is like being my own fan, right? Like I always want to be the first fangirl of like anything that I make. And that includes things that I produce too, right? Like shows like Life with Leo and In Strange Woods. Basically, like Tavy sent me a script for Life with Leo, and the In Strange Woods trio sent me a pilot proof of concept for In Strange Woods. And I was like, I am obsessed. I am fangirling so much about these projects that like I just want to facilitate them existing in the world. So I think that like that's the way that I function. But like I am a fangirl at heart, right? Like I've been in fandom for 20 odd years and it's a huge part of my life. So I think that like related to that, something that really helped me when I got into a very, very bad creative funk, just sort of was burnt out after years, and came off a really bad job. I just started writing fan fiction for a TV show that I loved. And I wrote 250,000 words of fanfic, which is like the equivalent of like 3-ish books in a year, because I just like the brain rot got me, and I just, and it's like nobody knows what, like I've one friend from that fandom who now knows, actually like one of my best friends, we met through that, which was like another great joy of this. And that's another thing that I'll get to in a second that I think is important. But like being creative in a way where it was like, I know I can't attach this to my real name. I know that like this can't lead to anything, but I'm having a blast, and it's helping me be creative. And then, yeah, in that particular case, like I met a friend who I ended up getting really close with, close enough that we were like, here's who I am, who are you? You know, we kind of became IRL friends. And she's been really creatively wonderful for me in the way that Megan has been through the years and Brigham has been through the years. And so I think like having those hype friends, right, to sort of pal around ideas with. I've written Megan fanfic for her own stuff, you know, and just sent it to her, like stuff that doesn't exist out in the world, but stuff that she sent me. So I think just having that circle of like cheerleaders and people that you can be creative with, purely for like that like lying in your stomach and kicking your feet sensation that it gives you. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when I describe that sensation, like probably none of my advice is going to be helpful to you anyway. This is good advice just for writing in general. I thought my book was a second chance romance, and then I wrote a scene from the best friend's POV, and I was like, whoa, this is the book. Yeah, that can happen sometimes too, where you think a story is one thing, and then you actually get into it, and you're like, hold on a second. And yeah, I think always that's like always a really great thing to just try. Another really good piece of advice that somebody gave me once. I think it may have been Megan, actually. Because like she and I mainly write scripts, right? That's like primarily what we do. She's a TV writer and a comic writer and an audio drama writer, and I'm primarily an audio drama writer. And so like, but we also both work on books, right? Like work on prose. And I, you know, sometimes I have a really, really hard time with prose, right? Because it's like I think in audio first, and so I'm not picturing what people are doing with their bodies all the time. And she was like, why don't you take a scene, I think it was Megan, whoever it was who was telling me this. Why don't you take a scene from a TV show or a movie that you love, and you like just write out that scene as a scene from a book? And I think that advice works in the reverse as well. Like take your favorite scene from your favorite book and write a script version of it, right? And so again, like I think like sometimes like literally writing fan fiction, or even just like taking something that exists and putting it exactly to the page, but just describing what's happening, or translating it into another medium is another good way to stay creative. So yeah, I think always remembering that like if you are creative full time, or like somebody like me who like is a creative full time, but like even if it's not paying the bills, if you are like dedicating your life to being a creative, there are going to be times, many, many times, where you do something, you write something, you make something, and immediately the wheels start turning of like, okay, how can I turn this into content, right? Like how can I make this something that will drive people towards my work, that will bring in money, that will establish me further in my career, my field, my industry, whatever. You need to resist that urge sometimes. Sometimes that urge is good, right? Sometimes that urge is like, you know, like I just really wanted to like write something for Brigham and Andrew. And so we make New Year's Day every year. And it's like, that's so fun. I just finished the first draft of the next script that comes out January 1st. And like, it was so fun. I had so much fun with it. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. But like, there are other things that I have, like things that I've written, ideas that I've had, things that I've made, where it's just like, I could turn this into something, but like, I'm not going to, because like, I don't actually think it's something that other people would necessarily enjoy, or it's not something I could continue or put into a bigger thing. So it's just going to exist as the thing that it is on my computer. And I think knowing when those things come up, not trying to turn everything into an opportunity for more content is like very, very important. That was a long answer, but that's a heavy question, or not heavy question, but a juicy question. All right, actually, I only have one more question in my spreadsheet. So ask those questions in the chat if you've got them, about writing, about producing, about anything really, about Phantom Pulse. Okay. Okay, Jeremy, creator of Two Flat Earthers Kidnap a Freemason, which is a very fun show that I highly recommend, had a question where he asked, given your journey from self-producing indie fiction podcasts to representation and larger creative projects, what advice could you give to another fiction podcaster who's trying to leverage their existing IP to get seen by representation, but hasn't had any luck with networking events or cold querying emails? How do you recommend someone in my position take the next step to breaking in? It's a great question. And it's one that I think probably I have maybe a skewed perspective on, simply because I think the first thing to ask yourself. So, okay, so you've got all of this IP, you've got some shows that have done well, you've got a bunch of creativity, and you want representation to sort of like help turn that into something bigger, right? I think first and foremost, you need to figure out exactly what you want from representation. Do you want that person to take Two Flat Earthers Kidnap a Freemason and turn it into a TV show? Do you want them to help sell your screenplay for your feature film? Do you want them to help sell your book that you've written? Do you want them to help you get jobs writing in TV rooms? Do you want them to get you help writing for audio drama? Because each of those things is like very, very different. And obviously, like, agents and managers can be a catch-all and oftentimes are and like do all of those things. But I think for audio fiction specifically, if that's where you're coming from, like, I love my agents. They're amazing. They helped me navigate the TV landscape in a way that like I would never have been able to do without them. I literally got my agent because the guy who used to run Apple Podcasts, like the singular guy, introduced us. Like that was, and like my agent was like the podcast agent in town. You know, this was like a very different time, right? And so like I actually don't necessarily have practical advice on how to like query. But I would say if you are just hoping to get jobs writing for audio dramas or sell audio dramas, I think the more effective thing potentially would be to reach out to the places that might be buying those directly, like Audible or the BBC. End of list, unfortunately. Not a lot of people are buying audio fiction right now. So like, let's say that you want to turn it into a TV show. I think you go to the agent that you want with a very specific pitch. Say, I have this TV show. Here are the exact metrics. I find the metrics that they usually want is like number of downloads, whatever the biggest number that you can get. Like, you know, so for the Bright Sessions, it's like over 25 million downloads. We have over 100 episodes. So it's like when you break that down, like what does that really mean? But it sounds big, right? I mean, it is big. A lot of people have listened to that show. So find the biggest number you can get and then also break down to like, you know, this percentage of our audience is female, this percentage of our audience is this age, this percentage of our audience is in the US or whatever. And sort of like create a pitch deck with that. And then also like attachments, right? So like, unless you have, sorry, you said other things in your message, Jeremy. I only read your question, but let me quickly see what the other okay, original IP, some unproduced screenplays, and a stack of ideas for new projects. Yes. So I think because you have something that is solid, right? Like you have this show out there that exists that people listen to. I think maybe starting there and being like, I would like to adapt this TV show. Here are the metrics. Here are the people who would be into it. Here are the actors that I think would be good to play these roles. Pick them from that agency's roster, right? So like, let's say that you are pitching to CAA, you know, find the actors that CAA represents that could be great in the roles in your podcast, right? Find the writer who would be a great showrunner for that. Find the director, whatever it is, right? But like sort of put together a package for them and say like, this is kind of how I see it. I'm not like very well versed in the TV world, but like that's usually what ends up happening is like you kind of like package a thing with other people on the roster and then take it out to a network and things like that. And that might be an easier way than just sending an unproduced screenplay, simply because people aren't buying stuff right now. Like it's just a very, very tough market at the moment from everything that I'm hearing from my friends in film and TV. It's a tough market in podcasting too. So I think trying to go with like the IP that you've already established can be good. I think especially if you present it to them, like I completely understand if you want to control the TV show version of your show. Unless you have TV experience, they're probably not going to let you do that. So I think sort of starting with like, I think that these three writers would all be great options to show run this show. We'll kind of also show them like, okay, this person has something that they want to like offer to us. They don't have an ego about it. Let's have a conversation. And then also just like IMDb Pro is great. You mentioned IMDb Pro in your message. Also like look into like what connections you have, right? Because IMDb Pro has that thing where it's like, you share these credits with these people, right? I was on an episode of Hello from the Magic Tavern, so I am 1 degree of connection away from every comedian in LA, which like that's not actually meaningful necessarily, but like sometimes you can be like, oh, wait a second, that person that I worked on that podcast with is represented by this agent or is friends with them or worked on this thing that they produced. And so I think like using that to sort of to make like a sort of personal plea, like finding whatever kind of way in you can to get directly to that person. But yeah, I think thinking out like very, very specifically what exactly you want to accomplish. Is it selling that screenplay? Is it adapting that TV show? Is it getting a book deal? And then doing as much of the work for them as you possibly can so that they feel like they're being handed something cool on a silver platter and they're like, oh hell yeah, this could be easy to pitch. Also, I mean, like sometimes, I've gotten to know talent agents simply by like reaching out to them and being like, hey, like I'm always looking to hire actors on, on SAG fiction podcasts that I make. Just want to like throw out there that like if you ever have any like young up and coming actors who like fiction podcasts and like want to get into the game, whether as a producer or an actor or whatever, because like that actually does happen. Let me know. Like I'm here. Like I always want to keep people in mind. Sometimes that can lead to a connection as well. And it's like that person that represents actors like probably won't represent you, right? Because those are different departments, but like they might introduce you to their colleague. So I think just like remembering that like it's a tough market right now. And so the fact that you're not getting traction has nothing to do with you. And that, like ultimately it's a very, very stiff competition when it comes to the sort of the field that's out there. So sort of like making it as easy for the agent as possible, or the manager, whoever, and making it seem like they're getting something out of the bargain, I think is sort of my like cold-hearted take. Someone might have a completely different take, but that's my perspective. Okay, Luna asks, might not apply because most of your projects are overall your creations, but do you have any specific advice for co-writing a pilot? Fred and I have a concept for a show, but I think we're struggling with getting into the rhythm of starting it off, especially because neither of us wants to take the lead, so to speak. We want to be creative partners. Ooh, juicy question. I love this question. Yes, I do have opinions on this. So I understand not wanting to take the lead, but I'm going to suggest that someone always has to be in charge. I've worked with so many wonderful collaborators throughout my career, and I've learned so much from them. I hope that they've learned things from me as well. Sometimes I'm the person in charge, sometimes they're the person in charge, but somebody has to be in charge. That doesn't mean that like you and your co-writer can't be partners and can't equally own the thing. And this is where I think when it comes to co-writing something, you have to figure out what exactly you're in charge of, right? So kind of like breaking down what a script or what a story is into its component parts, right? Like start with like, okay, you're writing a pilot, suggest that it's a series, right? So start with the series outline, kind of figure out like, okay, like what are each of the episodes about? Like do a good like whiteboard day, like talk about what you want each episode to be. And then like break down who gets those episodes, right? Because like I find it's kind of easier sometimes to trade off episodes rather than co-writing them, though I have also co-written scripts before. And a pilot makes sense to be co-writing. But like once you break down sort of who's getting what episode in a season, a pattern is probably going to start to emerge where it's like, oh, like, yeah, I'm taking a lot of the sort of more action-packed episodes and you're taking a lot of the more like character-focused episodes or like in a balanced show, like both of those things will be in the mix in each episode. But it's like, oh, you really lit up when we talked about that thing. And so you seem really excited about that particular like character development point or that particular plot point. So like you should have this episode where sort of that pivotal thing occurs, right? Or even saying like, I'm really stoked about that particular scene that we talked about. Can I write the episode that takes place in? And I think like as you discover those things, like something I found very helpful with John Dryden, the brilliant creator of Passenger List and many more wonderful podcasts. John is a veteran audio drama producer and writer and director. He's British, so like they never stopped making audio drama. They've like actually got like a tradition and like a sort of industry standard there for a lot of the way that they do things. So I learned so much from him, like doing Passenger List. Like the first season of Passenger List, second season was in COVID, so it was a little bit different. But the first season of Passenger List was like grad school for me. Like I learned so much from him. And something that was really fun is that like, so he initially hired me on to write one script. I sort of ended up talking myself into a co-producing and co-directing role. And he was in England. Our lead actor, Kelly Marie Tran, wonderful. And all of our other writers were in LA. So like I was sort of in charge of the LA writer's room and also of going through all the scripts with Kelly and making sure that it fit her voice. And we also had sort of two central characters, Kelly's character and then Colin Morgan's character. And Colin Morgan's character, British, right? And John also, this brilliant plotting mind, right? Like he's so good at plotting these mysteries. And so we basically just like naturally fell into a thing of like, okay, when a script is done, John's going to do a pass to make sure that the mystery and the plotting all holds together based off of a show Bible that I was keeping track of, kind of keeping track of all of the mystery, just like taking notes basically of like this thing happens here, this bit of information is revealed here, et cetera, et cetera. Then I'm gonna do a pass of a sort of character voice, making sure that Kelly's character sounds like a young American woman, because back then, at least, I was a young American woman, relatively speaking. John is a British man. So, and I also, had the ability to talk to Kelly about it because we lived in the same place. And then John would do sort of the showrunner's pass, right? And so we sort of had these things that we were responsible for, right? Like if it came to like a thing of like character development with Kelly's character, like I would often be the person who sort of like got to decide that, right? Whereas if it was like a sort of plot thing or like a structure thing, that would be John's purview. And so I think kind of figuring out like what are the things that you want to be responsible for, and then taking the lead on those things. And then when it comes to actually co-writing the pilot, like I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. Like when Misha and I wrote the Ars Paradoxica Bright Sessions crossover episode, we literally just like sat at a coffee shop and sort of like role played as like Anthony Partridge and Sam, and Misha just wrote it down in their notebook, and like that was the script basically. And that obviously was a little bit easier, right? Because they were in charge of Ars Paradoxica side of things, I was in charge of Bright Session side of things. We basically were just building a conversation. But I still think that you can do that, right? And if let's say you have like 3 lead characters, right? Like kind of figuring out like, okay, like, this one is sort of like my little guy that like I'm gonna sort of develop further, and this guy is sort of your little guy that you're gonna develop further, and still being part of each other's creative process in that. But you need a tiebreaker. Like that's really what it comes down to, right? And especially when you get into things like production, like if it's something that then you're producing together, when things come up on set during recording and a decision needs to be made, somebody needs to have the authority to make that decision. So like with Phantom Pulse, for instance, I really want that to be like fully collaborative, right? And so I've got this amazing team of people. Ella Watts as my co-director, who's just incredible and who I've known for like 10 years. Brandon Grugel is the sound designer, also my partner. So like, we obviously have a great working relationship. And then Evan Cunningham, the composer and songwriter, who did the Bright Sessions musical episode with me and who I've known since he was 18 because we went to college together and sang in college a cappella. So it's like, not only are these people that I've collaborated with before and respect and admire deeply in their respective fields, but they're also like close friends, right? Or people who are important to me in my life. And I sat down with each of them before we made the pilot proof of concept that we made last year. And I sort of said, like, okay, like when it comes to, we all have different taste. We all have compatible taste, but we all have different taste. And so when it comes to like a take choice, that's Ella's purview of a performance take, right? When it comes to music things, Evan gets to be the tiebreaker. He gets to sort of decide, right? When it comes to sound design, Brandon gets to decide. But ultimately, it is my creation. So if there's ever anything that I feel super strongly about, and I was like, you guys are gonna have to trust me, and I'm gonna trust you, that like if I ever sort of like pull rank, right, and say like, actually, I hear your point and I hear your point, but I want it to be this way, we're going to trust that like, that's the right decision. But sort of breaking it down that way. And like, that is how it worked in the pilot, right? There were certain things where I was like, I kind of want it to be this way. And then one of them would sort of give their explanation for like, I think it should be this way. And it'd be like, okay, yeah, no, you're right. Like you are in charge of the music. You are in charge of sound design, whatever it is. That's correct. Let's do that. So I do think it's important to sort of even in really great collaborative, and this might be controversial, right? Some people might disagree with me and think that like you can do something completely equally, and you'll never encounter any kind of conflict or disagreement and be completely, roadblocked. And obviously like, with an odd number of people, you could kind of figure out a tiebreaker situation. But if it's just the two of you, I think kind of sitting down and talking about like, okay, well, what's sacred to you about this project, right? Like, what is the thing that you want to say with this project? What is the thing you're most excited about? And then sharing that yourself, and then kind of deciding like, okay, like we're either going to sit here and we're going to co-write this together. And if we have a dispute around like how a particular scene will go, like this is kind of how we'll decide it. Or you're going to take this scene and I'm going to take that scene, and then we'll get together and we'll do passes on each other's scenes and sort of, track those changes to see what, rewriting we're doing. Like literally just coming up with like almost like an HR reporting system, right? Like sort of like, what's what is the run of show? Like, what is the protocol for like when disputes come up? I think is important. I hope that answered your question. That was a really long-winded answer. Um, but I do love that question. Mike says, I have a lot of loose ideas. I think I just really need to try storyboarding things out or even just a cloud diagram or something. Yes. Like there's so many. Oh, good, Luna. I'm glad that was helpful. I love a good storyboard. I love a good whiteboard. I actually don't have a whiteboard anymore because I don't really have space for it in here. But I do have this like blank space right here that because the rest of my wall is all covered. And then these are all windows. So like there's just not really a good place for a whiteboard. But this blank space right here, I put a lot of Post-its on. And so it's like, when I was doing like Maxine Miles, like a mystery, right? I sort of like put out the Post-its and mapped it out. Same thing with, oh my God, with Breaker Whiskey, like figuring like, and there's some great apps and websites that can do those types of things too. But yeah, having like a sort of like a dumping ground of ideas, like in my Asana, my like task tracker app, I have just sort of like a what is called in the app Lauren's Hermit Corner, which is just like where I put like all my stray ideas. And then like when I sort of pull an idea out of there, I've got my own sort of organizational ways of going about kind of creating the world. And I think that's something that's just like trial and error. And you just kind of have to try a bunch of different things before you land on something that works for you. Okay, Sienna asks, do you have recs for creating filler episode plots / individual episode plots? I have no idea what to put between major story moments, but I want to make the world feel lived in. Ooh, that's a good question, especially because I think sometimes I do too many filler plots. It's funny, actually, like Phantom Pulse, this show about this rock band that exercises, goes through their music, and in every episode there's an exorcism where they play an original song, and it's like this huge set piece, and and there's this like mystery involved, and there's these secrets that they have, and there's like this big plot that's occurring. All the scenes that I have written so far, outside of the entire pilot script is written, but all the scenes I have so far are like them like shooting the shit in like a diner, right? Like I love that stuff. Like that is my bread and butter. Sometimes to the detriment of my stories. And I often have to be like, okay, something actually needs to happen now. So I'm trying to think of like how I solve my problem for that and how to reverse engineer that for you. I mean, like, yes, oh my God, I do need a chalkboard wall. I have thought about like painting this with whiteboard paint, but we're renters, so I don't think I should do that. Yeah, I would start with, let's see, like single episode plots. I mean, you can't go wrong with a classic, right? Like take your story, look at your season, and think, what is the bottle episode? Right? Like if you're not familiar with the term, a bottle episode is an episode of television traditionally that all takes place in one setting, right? So it's like all the characters sort of like locked in a room together, right? The Breakfast Club is basically a bottle episode as a movie. And bottle episodes are like The Bright Sessions also is basically like just a series of bottle episodes. My personal favorite, like I love a good bottle episode because especially if it comes like sort of halfway or like later in the season, you can like really like pressure cook a bunch of stuff and then like have it come out in that bottle episode. So it can be a major plot point for sure. Another thing that I've seen thrown around, bottle episodes, like an actual like term in the TV industry, but another term I see a lot in fandom is the beach episode. Like let's go to the beach, right? Like a thing where like the characters just go off and like do something fun, and like maybe things go terribly wrong. Wolf 39 has a lot of bottle episodes, a lot of great standalones. Thank you, Luna. That's a really good recommendation. And yeah, like I also agree that filler content is really important. At the end of the day, down for the ride. I want more than the major bullet points. I mean, me too, right? Like that's why so much of my stuff is filler and it's just sort of character work. So I would say like start with a bottle episode. Like drop your characters into a scenario like in which they're all together, or they're locked in a place, or they're just like, yeah, they're on a road trip and they're in a car for 2 hours, and like what is the conversation that's taking place there? Because I think that sometimes just like starting with like what are they doing when we're not doing the big plot stuff can just be a great place to start. Like just start writing that dialogue. And then you might find like, oh, okay, like now I kind of know where this is going. And I think also like, you can extrapolate that from from your major plot points, right? You can sort of think like, well, what's a thing that the audience needs to know before this major plot point hits? And how could I drop it into a conversation in a non-exposition-y way? Like, what might be the circumstance in which that piece of information would come out? So that can, like, you can still kind of move things along. I mean, even filler episodes still should move things along, right? Like, whether that's giving the audience a deeper understanding of the characters or, like, revealing something that then will be, a clue later on, it still should be moving something along. But I think just, like, starting with, like, your characters just, like, gabbing about something can be a good first step. I hope that was helpful. I've migrated here because Twitch told me I was talking too much and I took that personally. Oh my God. That's so weird, Solar. I'm sorry. Twitch is bizarre. Okay, good. I'm glad that was helpful, Sienna. Yeah, I do love a good filler episode, a good beach episode, a good bottle episode. And I think it's a great final question to end with. So thank you everybody for watching. I can't believe I've gotten through now all of the questions in the submission form. So next month, well, actually, I might take next month off because the last Wednesday in December is probably like during Christmas time. So definitely tune in, next month not next month, tune in January for another office hours. But I'm also going to be streaming on Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of next week. For Phantom Pulse, phantompulse.com. Go back our Kickstarter if you haven't already. Go check it out. Friday's stream is going to be listening to the first episode of Surviving Hawkins, the official Stranger Things show that I got to make with Netflix a few years ago about Maya Hawke's character, Robin Buckley. Maya Hawke is in it as Robin. It was so much fun to make. And I've been listening through all of the first episodes of Atypical shows, and like I hadn't even sort of put together that like Stranger Things comes back today. And so it's kind of perfectly timed. So if you've burned through all the Stranger Things episode by the time Friday hits at 2 p.m., come in and turn back the clock with me and listen to Robin in season 1. So that'll be 2 p.m. YouTube and Twitch. I probably won't stream to Patreon because I don't want to spam you guys too much. But yeah, YouTube, Twitch, 2 p.m. Friday, listening to Surviving Hawkins and probably playing Limbo. And then probably playing a little bit of Clone Hero because I'm having a lot of fun with Clone Hero. But thank you all so much for joining. Go check out that Phantom Pulse Kickstarter, and I will see you next time.